This is the History of New Zealand podcast on the Eat to My Own Beat podcast network. Welcome back to episode 22 of the History of New Zealand podcast, the Second Taranaki War. Between 1863 and 1866, there was a resumption of hostilities between the Maori and the New Zealand government in Taranaki, which is sometimes referred to as the Second Taranaki War. The conflict, which overlapped with the wars in Waikato and Tauranga, was fueled by the combination of factors: lingering Maori resentment over the sale of the land of Waitara in 1860, and government delays in resolving the issue. A large-scale land confiscation policy launched by the government by the late 1863, and the rise of the so-called Hawa movement, an extremist part of the Pia Maori syndicate religion, which was strongly opposed to the alienation of the Maori land and eager to strengthen Maori identity. The Hoa movement became a unifying factor of the Taranaki Maori in the absence of individual Maori commanders. The style of warfare after 1863 differed markedly from that of 1860 to 1861 conflict, in which the Maori had taken set positions and challenged the army to an open contest. In 1863, the army, working with greater numbers of troops and heavy artillery, systematically took possession of Maori land by driving off the inhabitants, adopting a scorched earth strategy, laying waste to Maori villages and cultivations, with attacks on villages, whether warlike or otherwise. Historian Brian Dalton noted, "The aim was no longer to conquer territory, but to inflict utmost punishment in the enemy. Inevitably, there was a great deal of brutality, much burning of undefended villages, and indiscriminate looting, in which loyal Maoris often suffered. As the troops advanced, the government built an expanding line of redoubts, behind which settlers built homes and developed farms. The effect was creeping confiscation of almost 4,000 kilometers squared of land, and was little distinction between the land of loyal or rebel Maori owners. The outcome of the armed conflict of the Taranaki between 1860 and 1869 was a series of enforced confiscations of Taranaki tribal land from Maori, blanketed as being a rebellion against the government. The East Cape War. East Coast hostilities erupted in April 1865, as in the Second Taranaki War, sprang from Maori resentment of punitive government land confiscations, coupled with the embrace of the radical Pia Maori expression. Religious arrived at the east coast of Taranaki in early 1865. The subsequent ritual killing of missionary Karl Volkner by Pia Mariner of Hauhau, followers of Opakati of the 2nd of March 1865, sparked settler fears of the outbreak of violence, and later the year the New Zealand government launched a lengthy expedition to the hunt for Volkner's killers and neutralize the movement's influence. Rising tensions between Pai Maori followers and conservative Maori led to the number of wars between and within Maori, with Kupapa armed by the government in a bid to exterminate the movement. Major conflicts with the campaign included a cavalry and artillery attack on the Te Tata Pa near Optoki in October 1865, in which about 35 Maori were killed. At the 7-day Waranga Hahika in November 1865, the government confiscated northern parts of Urewera land in January 1866. In a bid to break down supposed Maori support for Volkner's killers, and confiscated additional land in Hawke's Bay a year later, after a route of Maori party it deemed a threat to settlement of Napier. Tito Kuaru's War. War flared again in Taranaki in June 1868, as Rewa Tito Kuaru, chief of Narragansett, responded to the continued surveying and settlement of confiscation land with well-planned and effective attacks on settlers and government troops in an effort to block the occupation of Maori land. Coinciding with a violent raid of European settlement on the east coast by Te Kuti, the attacks shattered what European colonists regarded as the new era of peace and prosperity, creating fears of a general uprising of hostile Maoris. Titokawaru was fought in the Second Taranaki War, was the most skillful West Coast Maori warrior. He also assumed the roles of the priest and prophet of an extremist Hauhau movement of the Pai Maori religion, reviving the ancient rites of cannibalism and propitiation of Maori gods, with the human heart torn from the first slain in the battle. Although Titowaru's forces were numerically small and initially outnumbered in battle 12-1 by government troops, the ferocity of their attacks provoked fear among the settlers and prompted the resignation and desertion of many militia volunteers, ultimately leading to the withdrawal of most government military forces from South Taranaki and giving the Titowaru control of almost all the territory between New Plymouth and Whanganui. Although Titowaru provided the strategy and leadership that had been missing among tribes that had fought in the Second Taranaki War, his forces never lost a battle during the intensive campaign. They mysteriously abandoned strong position at Taronga Ikapa, and Titowaru's army immediately began to disperse. Kimball Bent, who lived as a slave with Titowaru's hapu after deserting from his 57th Regiment, told Cowan 50 years later that the chief had lost many manu tapu, a sacred power, after committing adultery with his wife of another chief. Once Titowaru's defeat and the East Coast threat minimized, the alienation of Maori land as well as political subjugation of Maori continued at even more rapid pace. Thank you for listening to the History of New Zealand podcast. We're found on YouTube and anywhere else you could find your normal podcasts. Please like, comment, and subscribe, or find us at www.eattomyownbeat.com.